Another day, another DLC released for Total Warhammer 2. Now, I normally don't review DLCs, but I make exceptions every once in a while, and for the Twisted and the Twilight, I had to. I mean, you got the return of the freaking Wood Elves, which is easily becoming one of my favorite races in Warhammer Fantasy. I especially enjoy playing as everyone's favorite genocidal tree known as Durthu. Instead of Durthu and Orion from Warhammer 1, the focus here is on the Sisters of Twilight versus Throt the Unclean, making this the third DLC to feature the Rat Bastards. I'll be reviewing both of them in the Vortex campaign, starting with the Sisters, but before I begin, I noticed that there is no longer a listing for initial difficulty. Granted, it was inaccurate before, but not having it at all is unwelcoming for a new player. One cool thing I do like though is the ability to either increase the difficulty of the Chaos Invasion or turn it off completely for the Mortal Empires campaign. Not necessarily part of this DLC, but a nice little patch. As the Sisters, you start right smack dab in the middle between Malekith and Morathi. However, your goal here is not to defeat mother and son. Instead, you need to heal the Witchwood and prepare for Ariel's arrival. The Sisters themselves actually start out pretty strong. They automatically start out on a Great Eagle and have several tools to work with. They can fire a single armor-piercing shot or can shoot a flurry of poison arrows at once. I tend to use the latter as it was highly effective in clearing out non-armored clusters. The potential for greater power is there as well, with future bonuses to Hawk Rider units and their own unique abilities. There's also a quest to get a Forest Dragon mount later down the road, but unfortunately I didn't complete that as it required me to capture a Dark Elf settlement, and I just didn't want the smoke. The main mechanic that separates them from other Wood Elves factions is access to the Forge of Daith. If anyone knows the lore, my man created the giant sword Durthu is swinging around with, so the potential for what could be done here is pretty high. Unfortunately, this mechanic is lackluster. You're given some loot early on that can be upgraded from winning battles and visiting the forge. Daith will randomly select an item he will upgrade for you, and you have the choice for a permanent upgrade or a temporary one. Problem with the temp upgrade is it resets the progress entirely for that weapon, so there's really no point for this. Every 10 turns, Daith can grant you a new item. You can select what kind of item you would want it to be, but there's no indication on what the item will be. Either way, it appears Creative Assembly will address these issues, so we will see what happens there. As mentioned before, healing the forest is the main goal here. This is done by having yourself or your allies control territory around the forest. If an enemy controls one of the settlements, this will have a negative impact on the healing process. During the process, there will be encounters that come up. These can be handled in one or two ways, either battle ensues or another route is taken. Most of the time, I would go for the battles as the armies tend to be smaller than mine, while the peaceful route may have some sort of negative public order bonus. Once you reach maximum level, you perform a ritual that will take a few turns to complete. This will ultimately allow a new building to be placed and further help the main forest heal quicker. The buildings gained are often very powerful and make performing the rituals worth it. I was actually very confused on where to go given the nature of the faction. This is where the new Deep Roots mechanic comes in. You can now teleport to forests across the map. However, this cannot be abused as there's a fairly long cooldown of 10 turns to use this again. I really like this mechanic as it provides the player with different paths to take. When it comes to the new units, the Wood Elves have some welcome additions. The Stag Knights were very powerful and fun to use, while the Glade Riders provided a cheaper alternative to Wild Riders. Zotes are powerful monsters with some great life magic spells, while Blade Singers can switch between basic and armor-piercing damage bonuses. All these units definitely help to supplement the roster. For Lords and Heroes, Spellcasters can now be used to lead your armies, and some can even be recruited with unique spells and abilities. All these are great additions for fleshing out the campaign. And of course, we got to talk about Queen Ariel. Reading up on her and the potential power here was definitely exciting, and I honestly saw her as being the female Croak. While she might not be as incredibly OP as Croak, she more than holds her own. She has a very high weapon damage for a spellcaster and has a unique blend of schools of magic mixed in with her own unique spells. She's deadly for both direct damage and support magic. I really enjoyed her. One of the biggest reworks that also apply to the Wood Elves from the original game are the use of Amber. Amber no longer is required to recruit certain unit types and is only used to research certain technologies. Amber is also now gained from healing forests and accomplishing missions instead of from territory. This was a huge request for a long time, and it's about time that it was addressed. All this madness will eventually lead to the final battle against Throt the Unclean. I won't go too much into spoilers here, but it was a tough battle filled with a bit of a surprise twist, which I guess that's why they call it the Twisted. And that is the campaign of Serene Nestra and Tempestuous Arahan. Overall, it went pretty quick in terms of turn count, just a little bit above 100, but it felt slow throughout. Daith's Forge is underwhelming, and the forest took a while to heal early on. It's not a bad campaign, especially with Ariel to play with, but I prefer Durthu's and someone else that I'll talk about later. In the dirty corner, we have Throt the Unclean looking to satiate his hunger by feeding on Queen Ariel. Her arrival will come in 50 turns, but before that, he can destroy power stones that will remove her bonuses when she turns up, as well as delaying the process. Once 3 stones are removed, however, you can manually initiate the final battle. Right off the bat, you can tell there's much more going on here than the Sisters. Throt has access to his unique lab where he can perform different experiments on units. Some of these bonuses are just insane and can make units incredibly powerful. However, there is a risk as more experimentations leads to more unstable creatures. Once a unit is marked as unstable, they can recycle to fill up the growth VAT meter. When it reaches a certain tier, you can cash it in for some units or wait until it's completely full to get even more powerful units. Honestly, this one mechanic alone is worth playing the campaign. When it comes to the units, I won't go in depth on what the Skaven have since many of these creatures fill the similar roles as current units, although the wolves are a nice addition to add some flanking abilities. What I do want to talk about, however, is the unique hero called Gorich. This dude looks straight out of Warhammer 40k with all the crap he has on him, and he definitely is a memorable one outside of just his appearance. He not only is a great melee threat, but also has a wide array of abilities to help support his allies as well as dealing direct damage, a unique specimen that's definitely worth tracking down. The final battle is basically the same, just in reversed, and it ends in such a perfect Skaven way that I actually got a chuckle out of it. This one was surprisingly even shorter. It may have been pressure from the timer to move a bit quicker, or the fact that the Skaven have an insane amount of power creep with all the DLC thrown their way, but even so, this felt more enjoyable. I can see myself giving Throt a try in Mortal Empires, but who knows for now. This only pertains to owning the original Wood Elves DLC from the first game, but I figured I'd mention it here. Please note, you do not need the Twisted and the Twilight for this, and it will not factor into my final score and decision. With that said, you can now play as Dryka, a malevolent dryad looking to get revenge on those who have wronged her. I actually was far more interested in her than the Sisters the closer we got to release. And honestly, she has the most enjoyable campaign for me. Aesthetically speaking, I love the purple color hue. Not sure if purple is necessarily the color of vengeance or malevolence, but the contrast from the green of the other Wood Elves is a nice touch. The units that she gets feel so different than what the previous DLC provides, as she can recruit wolves, spiders, bats, and even a freaking feral manicore instantly. This honestly changes up the whole dynamic on what you can do, and having a faction-wide bonus of Vanguard deployment is just the icing on the cake. She still has access to many of the classic Wood Elf units, but are altered slightly. Tree Spirit units are granted the Frenzy ability, while Elven units are weaker and have the expendable trait. Mix this with the units I mentioned before, and you have one hell of a good time. Dryka herself, I wasn't too crazy about her spells since she comes from the School of Shadows, which is honestly my least favorite of all the various schools of magic in the game. However, she has her own unique tools to bring to the table and can get pretty physically powerful. She even has a questline where she can get a powerful treeman in her army known as Koido. Not only does he have higher weapon strength than a regular treeman unit, but also has beast magic along with his own unique damage dealing abilities. I am honestly surprised with so much that was crammed for Dryka, considering the Twisted and the Twilight is not required. Overall, this was a solid DLC. Even though the Sisters got the short end of the stick, I was happy to finally try them out. I was originally skeptical of a third Skaven DLC, but Throt's laboratory and new units were a blast to play with. If you don't care about the Skaven at all, I would say wait for a sale on this one. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you all are staying safe. And this is Powerhouse, signing off.